On This Week in Enterprise Tech, Verizon and AT&T are now selling your location data. Always connected PCs are trying to make a dent in the enterprise market. And Brian, Curtis, and I talk with a great guest, Eric Bednash, about Racktop Systems to talk software-defined storage. Twyat on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Enterprise Tech is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Twyat. This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 296, recorded June 22nd, 2018. GDPR and software-defined storage. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Moogsoft. Reduce IT alerts and tickets by up to 99%. Visit Moogsoft.com to learn more and sign up for a demo. And by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Home plays a big role in your life. That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. It lets you apply simply and understand the entire mortgage process fully so you can be confident that you're getting the right mortgage for you. Get started at rocketmortgage.com/enterprise. And by Slack. Slack is a collaboration hub for work that makes sure the right people in your team are always in the loop and key information is always at their fingertips. Learn more at slack.com. Welcome to Twyat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that's dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm Louis Maresca, your host and your guide through the world of enterprise. But I definitely don't want to guide you by myself. I need some help from my friends, starting with Mr. Brian Chibert. Brian Chi, actually. We don't want to call him Chibert. Of course, the Advanced Network Computing Laboratory, the director of that. And, of course, we think he's a little bit tired today because his voice assistant's not doing the job and letting him navigate through the underwater networking that he's got there.
Good morning. I had overnight watch, so we have to watch the webcam. We actually underwater webcam, and then we go and help the ROV position things. So gets interesting. So I'm tired.
You have some help from Alexa there, I've seen, right?
Yeah. I've got an Amazon show on my desk, and the Monocle skill allows me to stream RTSP video. So it gives me yet another piece of glass on my desk to manage.
Fantastic. Too bad you can't fix things with her, but sooner or later you will.
Actually,
of course,
it's connected to TotalView, so that's one of the things we're going to be talking about in episode 300. Woohoo!
Looking forward to it. Of course, we can't do this show without Mr. Curtis Franklin, senior editor at Dark Reading. How are you, my friend, and how is the swamp treating you?
Oh, I'm doing fine, and the swamp is doing okay. I'm enjoying the fact that this is the last time I'll be on Twyat from this particular location. Sometime next week we'll move up into the permanent digs, and looking forward to getting the full-time studio assembled up there.
Fantastic! Looking forward to it. I want to see the new digs. Cool. Well, thanks guys for being here. Really appreciate it. And of course, we got to start the show somewhere, right? And of course, why not with the blips? Well, California had response for the demise of net neutrality laws from FCC. Senator Scott Weiner's bill, SB 822, called the Broadband Internet Access Service. You probably saw that AT&T just got spending some money there, $86 billion to acquire Time Warner, but the company harbors dreams of using it to combine dominance over broadband and media content to have an anti-competitive advantage, something that's not undeniable if you see AT&T's past businesses. But the EFF actually looked and took the time to call out California's proposal, calling it the gold standard for state-level net neutrality laws. They felt it even did a better job policing many of the problem areas where modern anti-competitive behaviors occur, such as zero rating or interconnection. How long did you think it'd take or it last before a huge telecom came along and found loopholes? Did you bet a year or more? Well, you were wrong. How about a week? You probably saw that AT&T just got done spending $86 billion. Well, the company dreams of that, and they're going to move forward, and they found the answer to getting beyond this particular system. The company managed to convince California Assemblyman Miguel Santiago to introduce a series of secret last-minute Tuesday night amendments that were then voted without the debate during Wednesday morning hearing. What did they add? Well, items like permitting a controversial internet service providing practice called zero rating, where some websites and apps don't count against a consumer's data allotment. Opponents view zero rating as a backdoor, a way of discriminating against online services, and don't strike free data deals with broadband and wireless companies. Officials quickly rushed those amendments through the voting process before they can even be debated. It looks like the bill is no longer based on net neutrality, and it is no longer a win for free and open internet. It might look like it's time for deep pockets to win again, but let's hope not for much longer.
Hey, building a new app? You might want to run it through Chronicle. Chronicle, the security division of Alphabet, the company that owns Google, has released a service to cut down on false positives in malware scanning. Virus Total Monitor helps developers check to see whether antivirus tools are mistakenly identifying products as malware before they hit the market and on an ongoing basis. Developers can upload their products to a private cloud store in VirusTotal, where files are scanned with all 70-plus VirusTotal vendors. Now, files are only shared with the vendors if malware is detected, in which case the software is shared with the antivirus scanner that generated an alert so that both sides can see what's really going on.
Well, hey, Verizon and AT&T will stop selling your phone's location to data brokers. Verizon and AT&T have promised to stop selling their mobile customers' location information to third-party data brokers following a security problem that leaked the real-time location of U.S. cell phone users. Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat of Oregon, recently urged all four major carriers to stop the practice, and today he published responses he received from Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, USA, and Sprint. Wyden's statement praised Verizon for quick action to protect its customers' privacy and security, but he criticized the other carriers for not making the same promise. Quote, "After my investigation and follow-up reports revealed that middlemen are selling Americans' positions to the highest bidder without their consent or making it available on insecure web portals, Verizon did the responsible thing and promptly announced it was cutting those companies off," Wyden said. In contrast, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint seem content to continuing to sell their customers' private information to these shady middlemen. Americans' privacy be damned.
So people love startup culture. Who wouldn't? You think of an idea, put some money on it and time into it, and if you get it right, you could be the next billion-dollar company like of the Zuckerbergs and the Bezoses. But it comes at a price. Work cheap and hopes that things will pay off. Well, startups have really been driving the force between trending markets and the U.S. economy lately for many years. New jobs, new ideas, new markets, and trends. Until now, the share of startups in active companies is falling. A new report from Brookings Institution finds that in nearly every industry, from agriculture to finance, the share of new companies as startups is falling. What could be the cause? Well, one theory is startups are finding it hard to compete with the big business that can pay more, offer better benefits, and still retain a startup-like culture. Another related possibility is that most educated American workers are no longer attracted to entrepreneurship. In 1992, 4% of the 25 to 54-year-old range with master's degrees or PhDs owned a small company with at least 10 employees. In 2017, this was true of only 2.2%. Companies started by highly educated are often unusually productive. The economy is less dynamic, but fewer startups also means fewer destroyed jobs from the competition. This means that, contrary to the belief, jobs in the U.S. are far more secure than they were in the previous decades. Let's hope this means that innovation will still be up and on the up and up, and as the economy shifts.
Hey, be careful out there. Hackers are using hidden tunnels to launch financial attacks. The same security tools and strategies financial services organizations use to protect their data could be leveraged by cybercriminals who sneak in undetected via hidden tunnels to conceal their theft. Now, these hidden tunnels tend to be legitimately used for command and control functions in complex networks and application delivery systems. But, well, here's an example of how criminals use them. The Equifax attackers avoided using tools that would trip security alarms, instead building their own command and control tunnels into Equifax. They installed more than 30 web shells with different addresses to burrow into the company. Now, what stood out most was their use of hidden tunnels in HTTP, HTTPS, and DNS traffic, which threat actors typically use to get into networks protected with strong access controls. Now, hidden tunnels are tough to detect because communications are hidden within connections that use normal permitted protocols. Messages can be embedded as text in headers, cookies, and other fields. Now, compared with the industry average, there are fewer CNC behaviors in financial services, and HTTP CNC communications are lower overall, research reports are saying. However, there are significantly more tunnels per 10,000 devices in financial services, more tunnels than in all other industries combined.
Hey, did you know that seafloor fiber optic cables can work like seismometers? So there's enough seismometers around these days to detect and locate nearly all earthquakes on land, except the most minuscule ones. The seafloor is another story. It's expensive and difficult to maintain seismometers at the bottom of the ocean. Trust me, I know. So our coverage is pretty sparse. Earthquakes smaller than a magnitude 4 won't register in many places, and in many places in the ocean means a large portion of the planet. A group of researchers led by Giuseppe Mata of the UK's National Physical Laboratory accidentally stumbled on an inexpensive way to fill in many of the gaps. They're working on advanced fiber optic links capable of connecting things like next generation atomic clocks around Europe. At this level of sensitivity, any vibrations near the cable introduce noise into the signal, which is generally a nuisance to be overcome. But you know what? Surprise, surprise. In order to triangulate the location of an earthquake's epicenter, you need 3 seismometers. But because you can calculate that point of first contact along a very lengthy cable, you actually only need 2 cables to map an epicenter. So you know what? The University of Hawaii's Aloha Cabled Observatory project has been fighting a very, very long battle to convince cable companies into adding science packages to coexist with the optical repeaters on the seafloor. So along with the seismic functions, adding additional science packages can go a very long way to increasing the understanding of what's happening in the world's oceans.
So who knew that there was a fight in the market of magnetic spheres? Back in 2014, the Consumer Product Safety Commission went on a warpath, suing almost all the magnetic ball companies to force out similar products. One being one of the biggest, Buckyballs, where it had cost them almost $57 million in their business and their market, and they lost. The company that manufactured Buckyballs, Maxfield and Oberturn, was dissolved into December 2012, which is why the CPSC sued the founder rather than the business. Why were they sued? Well, because they were basically causing hazardous, and unlike my Legos in the back of my room here, because kids were eating them and getting stuck in their digestive tract. Well, Zen Magnets is another company, found a way to survive the attack and spend the next 6 years in court. It was forecasted that they had a 95% chance of losing. But to stay alive, they had to issue a high warning on their packaging, better packaging, and different types of business models to sell their Buckyball, their magnetic balls. And last week, they won. Colorado District Court judge tossed out the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission's recall to decision on due process grounds, ultimately processing a win for Zen Magnets and their magnetic sphere market. Well, it's a win for me, too, because I like those highly magnetic spheres, and they relieve my stress when they roll them in my hands. But there might be another market for them, too. A win for small business and a win for the future of magnets. Congrats to Zen Magnets. Well, folks, that does it for the Blips. Next up, the Bites. But of course, first, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Moogsoft. So as an engineer, I can tell you I've worked decades in the SaaS and cloud services industry, and it's tough to handle those incident tickets as they come in. It could actually be a huge time waster. You got to make sure they get done quickly. And ops teams, they tend to route them to software development teams, or they send another engineering team here or there. And what ends up happening is you get duplicate incidents that come in all over the place. You have multiple engineering teams wasting their time on the same thing. All the while, customers are running into the same issue, calling support. Well, this is one of the many advantages of using Moogsoft AI apps. It's artificial intelligence for IT operations. They have a patented noise reduction technology, as well as automatic deduplication and alert ranking. No rules, no filters. They manage the flood of alerts for you. They can literally reduce your alerts up to 99%. Not only that, it integrates with just about everything. And it's extensible, which means you can easily integrate your system into it because it uses standard mechanisms like REST API, webhooks, and more. Plug your data streams into it and get it working for you. Moogsoft is really the one-stop shop for IT dev and organizations because it analyzes, manages, and routes that fire hose of alerts to make it more manageable for your organization. So this type of system is really a gift because if you think about it, small or large organizations can then scale their services and IT business. It makes it so you can achieve full visibility across your entire organization, and you can make sure you have visibility into your entire stack with no blind spots. Moogsoft can even look for patterns in order to provide root cause for any incoming situation. Not that you needed any more proof, but that global IT managed service provider, HCL Technologies, they included Moogsoft AI Ops in their award-winning Dry Ice platform within their event management layer. And not only does this help the organization reduce op workflows, but it also helps reduce detect to correct time throughout the life cycle of the incident ticket. Well, it actually helped them reduce their mean time to restore by 33%. What does that mean? Well, it means that they can support more customers at higher service quality, all the while also keeping their operating costs low and their efficiency high. With Moogsoft AI Ops, you can reduce your IT alerts and tickets by up to 99% right now. Visit Moogsoft.com to get a demo. That's Moogsoft.com. And we thank Moogsoft for their support in This Week in Enterprise Tech. All right, folks. Well, now let's get over to the bites. We want to dig a little bit deeper in some of the trends of stories in enterprise tech. And this one's no exception. I don't know if I've had this dream for years where you have this PC that would last the entire weekend when you're traveling around without having to plug it in, but without the sacrifice of power and speed. Kind of like my desktop replacement dream of having this machine to be able to travel around with that. Well, isn't that the promise of what the APCs or always connected PCs were? Well, let's take a look back in history a little bit. At Windows Hardware Engineering Conference, or WinHEC of 2016, Microsoft got on main stage and they promised the full-blown version of Windows supporting Win32 applications to run on Qualcomm chips in the near future. A year later, hardware vendors delivered some pretty compelling devices, such as the new Asus Nova. But there was a problem. They might have a battery of 30 days and a standby of 22 hours of active use, but that was at the expense of the device's power. Efficiency is kind of the combination of power and battery use combined, not just good battery. So let's think about it to date. Not only did they have a processing power issue, but they also had Windows had a perf and compat issue because it didn't run 64-bit apps. And they also had a marketing problem. They didn't market it right after the different vendors kind of started building the devices. Well, let's fast forward it to now. Corrections of some of these things is you have Windows on Snap or Windows on Snapdragon processors, and it now offers 64-bit. Devs can recompile their apps and get 64-bit going. Not only that, VLC becomes one of the first ARM64 Windows apps. That's cool. I'm sure Brian will want to jump in on that. Of course, Intel's new display technology offers what they call low power display technology. It can offer an additional 4 to 8 hours of battery life for your devices. And of course, the number one thing is seems going to be helping out is Qualcomm's new processors. The Snapdragon 850 is a processor designed specifically for Windows devices to ensure 30% faster than the 8835 and even better battery life. So, okay, guys, I want to bring you in because it seems like we're there based off of what we're seeing from the technology standpoint. We all remember the first attempt of Surface RT back in the day. I had one. It wasn't bad. It was more of an entertainment device for me. I used it for videos and surfing the internet. But I think this might, based off the hardware specs and now the operating system, it means that we might be at the compatibility layer here. So, Chris, I want to bring it to you first. I think we finally have the beginning of the beginning, maybe for maybe the real product devices that allows for the enterprise players to maybe start bringing in the devices they need for their organization and maybe even their sales organizations?
Yeah, I think so, because this is an incremental sort of thing. We can see some devices that have been used, for continual contact that have worked fine. For example, we see a lot of what I would call blue-collar applications. Everything from delivery people who have a device that really needs to work through a single shift to the trade crafts where they have devices with the same sort of thing. So we have those in business that have become the continually connected devices. We've seen it move into retail and white collar spaces. Not only Microsoft, but companies like SAP with their software, they depend with a lot of their applications on the sales floor employees having a device that's always connected so that they can get instant analysis on customers, whether it's for previous buying preference or credit arrangements. So I think what we're seeing is incremental steps. And as you correctly point out, some of the big steps that we're still looking for are things like battery and the ability to update without having to reboot. To me, that's one of the things that where we really see some incompatibilities, because what we have is the desire for continual deployment, continually on devices, butting head up against the agile and DevOps disciplines, where in some cases we might have 20, 40, up to 100 different code drops in a single day, some of which are going to require application or device reboots to install the versions. So it's going to be interesting, I think, in the DevOps world, where we've been taught to treat everything as software, to see how some of this hardware is going to react to that kind of continuous deployment model.
Right. Yeah, I think, Hubert, I want to throw it over to you, because I think you're sitting in front of an ARM device there, and it lets you kind of do audio, video content, lets you monitor things. What if that device was more portable? What if you could use the tools that you normally use on your PC, take them with you? Now you can get 30 days of battery life. Now you can make sure you're monitoring your labs at all the time. And you're using even the tools that you need to help fix and to monitor them as well. Does that make it more compelling for you now that you have to worry less about carrying that charger with you or where you're going to go when you need to use it? Plus, you got LTE access at all times. You have to worry about finding a Wi-Fi connection. Is this good? Think you can help the industry some more, or you think it's just you already have it with mobile devices?
Well, I've had it. I carry an iPad mini around with an LTE modem and 128 gig of storage so that I can store the kitchen sink on it. And I've got all kinds of apps, and I jump through lots and lots of hoops so I can manage things remotely without having to lug around a full laptop. Now, having said that, the industry there's a really interesting little sub-current that's going on. And I first really started noticing it as I started fussing around with the Amazon Echo skills. So like one of the skills that I just started using is called Monocle. And realistically, what it really is a portal. So what happens is the portal receives the video stream, in this case RTSP, then it converts it to, I wouldn't say proprietary, but a more difficult way of handling video to get it up onto the Amazon show. We started out, there's a huge push. In fact, I was part of that wave trying to push virtual desktops. Didn't work. The industry didn't want it. The market didn't want it. Didn't quite work. What we are now starting to see is kind of this blending, a hybrid. So I think it's getting to be the time where we need less and less processor, because we're going to have an intermediary handling some of the reworking, handling some of the big load, and then providing that link into whatever, an ARM, so forth. Now, the interesting thing is one of the technologies that Qualcomm has had for the last decade and a half now is a technology that Kurt and I reviewed for InfoWorld magazine, and it's called digital fountains. So James Cameron actually used it during the filming of Avatar. What it allows you to do is take a lot of data that's streaming, channelize it, and then if the data connection is reliable, purposely drop out some of those channels and mathematically reproduce it at the far end without having to transmit it. Kind of like, RAID 5, RAID 6 type of thing. Qualcomm owns that and has been threatening to stick it into their chips. So if we're having to stream, reasonably large amounts of data from a middle broker, I could see Qualcomm starting to integrate that more and more into the Snapdragon series so that we can have a little bit of both. So I think we're going to start seeing ubiquitous computing always on PCs. I just think it's going to be wrapped up with some kind of fancy schmancy name, but we've had it. It just took a little more effort. Now we're going to start getting it in consumer devices that are much, much easier to use, like my Amazon Echo Show.
Right. Well, let's hope. I'm hoping for this. So, Chris, I want to throw it over to you too. Like, there's also a promise of better security here. So, like with always connected PCs, you're using more of LTE networks, broadband companies alike, but you're kind of staying away from Wi-Fi networks. So for the enterprise, that means maybe more VPNs, maybe even more secure networks, because you don't have to worry about these random Wi-Fi networks that people are jumping on. Your Salesforce is running into a Starbucks or something using a Wi-Fi. Instead, they're using LTE and still being able to use their PC and all their software with it. Is this something that's going to be required for enterprise? Is it going to change the surface here? Or is, like Cheever already said, is it already there?
Well, I think that we're getting there. I think you're going to see more use of LTE, but I think you're also seeing the Wi-Fi consortium start to add. They will be announcing next week, and I'll have an article next week on their WPA 1.3, WPA 3, which will provide additional security and additional ease of use. So it's important to note that as of right now, more than half of all the traffic on the internet comes via a Wi-Fi connection on the end. So, there's a lot of changing to be done here for security. So I think what you have is the happy circumstance where both Wi-Fi and cellular devices are moving to more secure statuses. Now, I just wanted to throw in, from a Microsoft perspective, this is absolutely in keeping with a long tradition of connected devices. Looking way back in history to long before when you, Lou, were with Microsoft, I remember a presentation in 1985 about Microsoft developer tools, where at that time they were assuming and building tools for a development community that was always network connected, where other vendors like Borland were still building tools that were complete for the single unconnected developer. Well, we see which philosophy won. And this notion that business users are going to constantly be connected is something that is at least, 33 years old with Microsoft. So I don't think it's any surprise that this is a direction that the company is promoting and that business in general is happy to follow.
Right. Cheever, I want to throw it over to you because I think Curtis brought up an interesting point. He said, listen, there's new technologies coming out, new Wi-Fi technologies, but that also means that organizations are going to need to upgrade their infrastructure to support it. With LTE, you're kind of using the advantage of all the investments that the broadband companies already put in, billions and billions of dollars, without having to really continue to maintain Wi-Fi around your organization and so on. Is this something that's going to help change the landscape for enterprises? Is it less cost here, or is this something that shouldn't be affected? I mean, they're going to upgrade their Wi-Fi no matter what.
I think we're going to always see a combination because, look at it this way, no matter what, whether it's LTE, whatever flavor of LTE or whatever the next mobile connectivity technology is called, it's always going to have a recurring cost. Now, if you have, for Wi-Fi, the cool thing is it's a relatively set cost other than maintenance and so forth. So enterprise is going to want to have a clean, easy way to switch back and forth between LTE and Wi-Fi. It doesn't always work. Like, for instance, when I want to start driving, because the Wi-Fi is so strong on campus, even though I'm starting to drive, I'll be moving between APs fast enough that the handoff doesn't really work well. So if I start it up and I don't turn my Wi-Fi off when I start driving, Waze starts going crazy on me. So anyway, there's a lot of interesting things that are happening. We're going to start seeing, well, obviously, the Generation 3 modems are being deprecated right now. In fact, if you haven't taken advantage of the Generation 3 trade-ins, I think you might have missed the boat. We're obviously going to start recycling that bandwidth into LTE and so forth, Gen 5. But one of the things that has been rolled out that's really interesting is LTE Band 1. It's a low bandwidth. Think of it as a really, really inexpensive way to get small amounts of data, so bursty data to people. So I'm going to see lots of interesting things coming out. So we might even start having like children's tablets or children's devices with LTE Band 1 in there, and the carriers seem to be ramping up in hopes that they can get a larger quantity rather than having to get lots of really expensive plans. So they're going to start seeing some tier pricing for mobile connectivity. So we're probably going to always have the Wi-Fi in our enterprise, in our organization, because we're, that's going to be the set cost. We don't have a recurring charge. But as we start moving around, yeah, I think we're going to see lots and lots more devices, especially as some of these new modems come out that are really, really teeny tiny and super power efficient.
Right. All right, Curtis. So Chibas mentioned, almost missing the boat here. So we talked about connective teams, software companies and service companies have been kind of pushing that mobile first business model for a while now. And do you think that this type of hardware and that OS support for your desktop will be able to change the culture back now that we've had these kind of mobile device push and services push already?
I don't know. Going back is tough. I think what we may see is ultimately a new class of devices that somehow bridges the gap. It's tough to predict, although what we can see over the long history of the computer industry is this back and forth between heavily centralized systems with some sort of thin client versus very thick clients that keep the processing power and the data out on the edge. I think that clouds and near ubiquitous connectivity are going to make it really much more difficult to go back to that edge-centric model, because we're going to have to see some tremendous advantages to that before people decide that they need to spread data all over the landscape once again. No, I really do think that we're on the way to this constantly connected device. Now, here's something we really haven't talked about, though, and that's exactly how we're going to get to it. To me, this is where we also start getting it away from type and typing as the primary user interface. I think this is where we start to get much more heavily into interactive voice response and voice control for applications. Let's face it, most of the time, what we're looking for is either some sort of very specific control action or data in a small chunk from our interaction with the device. And for both of those, sound and voice control can be much more efficient and much more effective than looking away from whatever we see before us and typing. So as we move towards ever more ubiquitous computing, look for us to proceed forward with the voice assistants. And this is where we could see some real shakeup, because the platform with the strongest and best voice assistant could well be the one that ends up winning for the next decade.
Wow, that's interesting. I've never thought of it like that. Schubert, what do you think? What do you think that, with the connected devices, is this going to also maybe push carriers to kind of change the way they're offering commercial programs and accounts? Because nowadays they don't have any more unlimited. It's gone. So how is this going to push that? I mean, do you think it'll change for consumers as well as commercial alike?
Yeah. The whole deal with unlimited is, I'm sorry, guys like Padre horribly abusing it. Just ask him how, when he got his last big unlimited plan, how he kept it on 24/7 doing downloads and streaming. And it's like, that's the reason why these carriers don't like it. Now, having said that, things are a-changing. Like what I was telling JJ to the 4884 in the chat room. JJ was asking about multi-SIM support on a lot of devices. I said, no, dude, you don't understand. We've had soft SIM technology for a very, very long time. In fact, I got to work with some of it doing work for the NATO long time ago. So the reality is what we might start seeing is we might start seeing devices that can finally take advantage of the soft SIMs in the consumer market. And so we might, with this kind of multiple SIM support, where a manufacturer goes and puts an encrypted token onto your device, you might start seeing devices being able to shop around. So where we have multiple carriers competing in a single market area, you might have people that can actually shop it around. That's going to make things kind of interesting for the consumer that carries a device. But I totally agree with Kurt that having small devices like Amazon Echo or things like that, where people are now starting to want these things to be traveling with them because they want it in their hotel rooms. They want it, I have one in my car. I've got a Roll Vivo. Having a device like that with a lower bandwidth, always on LTE connection or mobile connection sure makes it interesting. And I can see brand new markets opening up with money pouring like manna from heaven. So yeah, we're going to see changes. We're going to see more tiering. There's the carriers need to realize that there's lots and lots of money available as the market changes. Hop on the bandwagon. Do some of the things that we've seen in Europe with multi-SIM, multi-carriers. Let's start actually using the soft SIM technology that actually exists. Whatever's. Rant, right?
That's right. Well, listen, I hope it does kind of help shift the market a little bit. Becoming more mobile is kind of the dream of pretty much any person that does any traveling. So I hope it gets there, and I hope it kind of alters and shifts the market a little bit. Well, folks, that does it for the Bipes. But next up, we get to bring a guest in to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot. But first, we have to thank another sponsor of This Week Enterprise Tech, and that's Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. So Quicken Loans is rated the highest and one of the largest mortgage lenders in the country. And not only that, they have the highest customer satisfaction rating this past year. But they're not complacent. They want to make it easier for consumers to finance things. And that's where Rocket Mortgage was created. It's solving real-world problems for buyers and sellers. Quicken Loans realized it isn't easy to do refis and get new loans. The process was way behind the times. And for me, it actually took a pound of papers. I had to search through boxes and find data and proof of salary and income, time I can never get back. And I was assigned some random rep from the bank, and the only way for me to send stuff to him was actually had to fax it to him. It's kind of hard to do. It was super stressful. And that's why Quicken Loans actually created Rocket Mortgage. They make it simple. They reinvented the process, so you don't have to waste your time. You don't have to stress about it. It's all about you and the ability to buy a house, the house of your dreams without all the red tape. You don't have to go to the bank. You can do it right from any device, from any browser. All you have to do is go to rocketmortgage.com/enterprise. You spend a couple minutes of your time, They barely ask you any questions. They basically ask you things about things that you already know. You don't have to search for the answers. Things like your name and your address, the type of loan, simple things, purchase price, type of mortgage. That's it. Because Quicken Loans has partnerships with all the big financial institutions. They do the rest. They get all the information they need for your loan, and you don't have to do any more. You choose the rate, the term. They show you the terms and the loan as well as what you qualify for, all in just minutes. Now, nowadays, the housing market is going crazy, especially here in Seattle. It's crazy. People are giving offers directly at open houses. I've actually been to an open house where somebody actually said, hey, I want to have an offer. Here's my pre-qualification. Well, sometimes you want to maybe even offer the ability to actually pay for it, not just that pre-qualification, but the actual loan. Well, now you can jump on your phone right at the open house, go to rocketmortgage.com/enterprise, and in a couple minutes, you can show the seller's realtor you are serious about buying that property. It's Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Apply simply, understand fully, mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/enterprise. That is rocketmortgage.com/enterprise. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states. NMLS, consumeraccess.org, number 3030. And we thank Rocket Mortgage for their support in This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we now get to jump into my favorite part of the show, and that's bringing in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot. So Racktop Systems is a leading provider of high-performance software-defined storage embedded with advanced security and encryption and compliance. And today's guest is the co-founder and CEO of Racktop Systems, Eric Bednash. It's great having you here, Eric. Thanks for coming.
Hey, guys. I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. We appreciate you coming, and we have some really good topics today. But first, can you tell a little bit about yourself, kind of maybe your short journey in your career through tech and security?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I spent probably the greater part of my career in the Department of Defense intelligence sector, and just dealing with, big data challenges and data security challenges, right? So in kind of in that world, security and data are, they're intertwined, and it's sort of second nature for those that go together. And if you kind of contrast that to the way that the broader enterprise is thinking about data today, with the number of cyber threats and compliance regulations, and GDPR a couple of weeks ago, and so you sort of have what is kind of second nature in that environment, in that world, kind of sort of becoming second nature in the broader enterprise now, where sort of security and data go hand in hand, and that's sort of where I spent the majority of my career, and that's kind of what what we focus on at Racktop is bringing those two things together, right where the data lives.
Right, makes sense. So now that you brought it up, let's get into it. I think, endpoint security is kind of going crazy in the market today. Network detection, analytics is also going crazy in the industry. What does Racktop Systems offer to kind of that's different, but maybe even better in that case?
Yeah, so if you kind of look at the way cybersecurity is typically been deployed in the enterprise, you kind of, we spend a lot of time building this tough outer shell, right? So we spend a lot of time at the endpoint, at the edge. We think about security, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we think about firewalls and then IDS, IPS, and we kind of work our way in. We've been running antivirus and different things on the endpoints, but there's once you kind of break that outer shell, you get into what is a very unprotected, unsecure part of enterprise infrastructure, and that's where the data lives. So if you kind of take a step back and think about what it is you're really trying to protect within the enterprise, it's the data. So it kind of makes sense that instead of taking this sort of outside-in approach, which is how we've traditionally dealt with it, and flip that around and take this inside-out approach. And so by taking those advanced security capabilities and features that you would typically sort of see in an observer role on the network and on the external part of the infrastructure, and you move them directly onto the data, you actually can complete the puzzle, right? And so security is about an ecosystem and about multiple things working together. And so if you have this sort of thick outer shell and you have a protected interior, you actually complete that puzzle of being able to achieve, true enterprise security in sort of a world where cyber threats are, even more present.
Right. So it's interesting because there's a lot of endpoint security firms popping up here and there, and a lot of people are wondering, well, is this something I should be going to? Is it, should they be combining it with centralized data, or should they be just using one or the other? What is actually a better thing for organizations?
Well, I think that it's sort of an interesting challenge, right? And I think you have to have security in layers, right? So all the best security is done in multiple layers, and endpoint security is definitely an important piece of that puzzle. But we view sort of the enterprise core where the data lives as kind of the last line of defense, right? So think about if you think about the endpoint, they're kind of the most likely entry point for any sort of APT or something to get into the infrastructure. But we can kind of sort of assume that not all the endpoints on your infrastructure are going to be secured. Even if you are a very controlled enterprise, you're going to have guests that come in. You're going to have things that happen. You're going to have ways for different vulnerabilities and threats to find their way into your infrastructure. And so you kind of have to have this multi-layered approach, and where you move that sort of those protections to the data side as well, and that gives you that extra layer of security and extra layer protection, so that even though you may have something on the endpoint, you're also protected if something bad were to happen, whether it be a ransomware attack or some sort of data exfiltration or advanced persistent threat that over time is going to take things from your infrastructure and hide. You kind of need that extra layer. So it's not always about the endpoint, when it's connected, and what it can do, but you kind of have to have that other level of protection as well on the inside.
Right. So what kind of additional services? You talked about centralized data, but there's things about how sometimes organizations use their data differently. They store it maybe in multiple different locations. Plus that, you might get different behavioral access to data. What type of things does this type of system support to help kind of not only centralize data, but also help secure it more?
Yeah, so think about it as enterprise network attached storage, right? So if you sort of look at the utility aspect of it, it's sort of the big bucket that if you're an enterprise, you're going to dump all your stuff into. And becomes your master data repository. Large enterprises have many of these things distributed throughout the globe. And so now you take it up a level and you say, okay, well, we're in the world of cloud or hybrid cloud. So for an enterprise, it's more of a hybrid infrastructure. So some data is going to be in the cloud, some is going to be local. Some of that data needs to be moved into analytical platforms. And so it gets more and more complex. And so what we do is we sort of provide, both capabilities within the same infrastructure. So from a utility aspect, we have the ability to sit on premises in the data center within the enterprise. And then we have a technology called transparent data movement, which allows you to move data from that sort of core central infrastructure. Think about petabytes of data that may be locally stored within your company's infrastructure, and then transparently move that data into S3 or into Azure. And utilize it there, but without ever losing access to how it was originally, set up. So you think about, somebody trying to access a bunch of files, or let's say you're, in a media and entertainment scenario, your editor is shooting a movie, your movies are there in your central repository. It's got to be high speed, high performance access. But once that movie's done, you got to get rid of that data, but you don't want to totally get rid of it, right? What if you need to make changes? And so something like transparent data movement could leverage a hybrid infrastructure where you can sort of trickle it off to the cloud, put it in cold storage. But if you ever have to get that data again, you can sort of get it back, the same way you've always gotten it back. So from a utility aspect, we're addressing both the local on-prem and facilitating hybrid cloud at the same time, but then layering on the security on top so that you could meet sort of the real challenge, which is, as data grows, security and compliance challenges grow with it. And so, you really have to solve those two problems in one.
Right. So what about encryption? Does it, obviously people have to encrypt their data, and you talk about kind of having that transparency to data. Somebody might breach your network and they might have the key to unlock your data. How does this system type help with that? Does encryption make it more difficult, or is it just something that's just added effect?
It's encryption is kind of what we consider like the base layer of protection, right? So, you sort of have to encrypt your data, and it's kind of almost like table stakes, But then there's second layers of encryption, right? So if you think about different standards of data, encryption makes it hard to access the original content, and then if you encrypt it a second time, even if you to try to brute force decrypt it, it becomes extremely difficult to do that. And so it's kind of like it's almost like one of the easiest things you can do to protect your data is to encrypt it. And as we see, it's really effective for malware, ransomware, right? I mean, the whole reason that works is because they encrypt your data and they hold the key for ransom. So it is very effective, and it's something that we have inherent in all of our systems. And so it's kind of like a baseline capability. And what we offer is being able to encrypt that data all the time, so that it's always in its sort of native, protected, encrypted state.
Right, makes sense. So you already have some systems out there. These are security, information, event management products like IBM QRadar, HP ArcSight, and they help make sure that you load all this information to a database and you understand threats that are involved, more insights to that. Does the Racktop systems, do they actually integrate with that type of system and those types of traditional systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have a user behavior engine within the product itself, which is collecting user behaviors and how they access data, right? So, how they're using data and what I/O sizes, and so all of these really interesting characteristics that help create a fingerprint for a user's behavior. So you can sort of then determine, is this user logging in, or are they doing their sort of normal work, or all of a sudden they're touching 100,000 files. This is abnormal behavior. And so we collect all of that data within our system and utilize it, but we can also shift that data to third-party systems, security operations centers, SIMs, event managers. So you can take that information and utilize it, within that greater security ecosystem.
Makes sense. Well, we're talking with Eric Bednash. He's the co-founder and CEO of Racktop Systems. And when we come back, we're going to bring in the co-host to talk a little bit more about secure data and maybe even compliance. But first, we have to thank another sponsor in This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Slack. Now, if you haven't used Slack before, it literally is the collaboration hub for your work, your group, or your team, whomever you're trying to collaborate with. There's so many ways I've used Slack before. It allows me to bring numerous groups together in order to just organize the way we work. I've seen it in IT and operation teams, all the engineering teams and development actually come together in a single channel to organize their conversations, real-time messaging about their incidents. Plus, once they've added video and voice calling to Slack and file sharing, and then the ability to go back and search and gain historical context, it brought an even richer environment for people to keep up to date with what's going on. You create a new channel for new issues, showing alerts for real-time updates and channels. And because Slack is integrated to your entire system, it brings information to you. That's why it's the collaboration hub. Now, Slack keeps your teams together and ensures they're communicating efficiently and staying productive the entire step of the way. But imagine your sales team getting together on Slack. They can chat on the latest products, make sure they stay up to date, stay educated on the latest things. Maybe they even need to chat about a prospect or a new customer so they can stay up on their current clients. Even go later and come back and review everything. So if you have a salesperson that wasn't there in the meetings before, they can go back and get that historical context. Slack just creates a place where everyone can stay up to date and ensure they don't miss anything. So I've used Slack before, and I can tell you there's some really great features. In fact, I really like the new added feature, Slack Threads. Now you have a conversation off to the side where you can start another thread without clouding all the main conversations. Plus, there's searching is super simple. You can do advanced search modifiers like in a channel or from someone or before or after date. And it really helps me narrow down that historical context so I can actually find the things that I need. So people of any generation have found ways to use Slack and increase their productivity, whether it's planning a reunion or handling different facets of an event, maybe even supporting a product or a sales organization. Slack will just make it easier. There are tons of public committees and communities and organizations using Slack. I've actually joined DevChat and designers and UX workspaces to chat with my fellow industry experts in the area to kind of talk about some of the things that are coming out. Now, greater than 8 million daily users on Slack each and every day. Not only that, Slack has a strong app ecosystem. You want to add more functionality integrations? Well, there's Jira, Salesforce, Zendesk, and more. Over 1,000 apps. You want to integrate your own system? Well, Slack has a super thriving developer community as well. Hook up those webhooks on your way you go. It also works anywhere, iOS, Android, Windows, Mac. They sync seamlessly, and you can always pick up where you left off. There's 200,000 developers using Slack to build what they need to increase their productivity and collaboration. Why is Slack an amazing sponsor of Twilight? Well, because Slack brings the collaboration back to enterprises as well. With Slack's enterprise grid, you can literally light up workplaces that can be linked together and share channels, which allows people to take advantage of the entire graph of communication in that organization. Slack reduces your emails, streamlines your communication, saves time, and increases your productivity. With Slack, your team is better connected. Learn more at slack.com. That's slack.com. And we thank Slack for their support in enterprise tech. Well, let's go back to the action. We have our guest, Eric Bednash. He's the co-founder and CEO of Racktop Systems. So, Eric, before I get to my co-host, I did want to ask you a couple other questions. So, what about identity management? I think that, I want to secure my data. I want to make sure it's secured across the channels. I want to maintain the identities that I already have in Active Directory. Is there a way for you to also regulate access to the data at a later time once you have already established identities in Active Directory? Does it integrate with Active Directory? I guess the first question.
Yeah, absolutely. It integrates directly with Active Directory, and so from an access control perspective, that users can control access through Active Directory, but then we could also dig into Active Directory and obtain additional pieces of information, anything that's really in the directory structure. So, in terms of, being able to look at what a user's accessing versus when the last time they logged in, it's like, they haven't logged in for 3 months and all of a sudden they're just touching everything in the world. That's a bit of an abnormal behavior. And so that all that information can be integrated and accessed.
So one of the things I find pretty powerful for organizations is that ability to give temporary access to somebody, kind of like JIT access, and then retract it at any point in time. Now, does your systems actually help with that? Does it support that? Does it analyze that?
Yeah. So workflow and collaboration creates an interesting challenge, right, within the enterprise, especially within a globally distributed enterprise, right? So if you think about, the notion of sharing and security are kind of like at odds with each other, right? Because you need to be able to collaborate and share in order for your business to thrive in today's sort of modern enterprise. But at the same time, every time you do that, you create additional abilities to sort of lose data, to have data breaches, and things of that nature. So we're deployed in a number of scenarios where in sort of geographically distributed locations where you have collaboration and security are sort of two things that go hand in hand. And so, for your customers who typically would have to revert to using like a public, web sharing or file sharing service to take, intellectual property or proprietary data and share it out that way in what is, kind of a very insecure manner. We enable them to do that in a still enable that collaboration, but do it in a secure way that's audited and controlled, and allows them to sort of meet all the regulation and compliance without sacrificing that that important collaboration component.
Okay, Eric, why don't we dig down a little bit? We actually have a question from JJ to the 4884 in the chat room asking about what are the issues with BYOD. You touched on it a little bit, but do my BYOD users have to give up something, or is there a happy medium?
Yeah, so I mean, BYOD it's an interesting challenge, right? You're basically saying that what we used to look at as very controlling the corporate assets that are connected to the network in a very controlled manner, and saying, well, you can kind of bring your own device and get access. So. From our perspective, if you're in a BYOD scenario, the best way to access your data is to access it. And you actually mentioned this earlier, is through virtual desktop, right? So by creating sort of a thin layer between a BYOD type device and those, the corporate assets, you can still leverage and use them to their fullest, but without sort of breaching that wall. And that's really, you kind of have to think about things differently. A lot of times we want magic bullets, right? We want things to be, this is this is going to work and it's going to be great, but it's technology and it's really not always that way. And so a lot of times you have to sort of look at, how do you apply different technologies to solve that same problem? And so in that kind of scenario where you have BYOD, you actually don't have to give up anything, and you can still access that data. It's just in sort of how you would implement it within your enterprise, and you would do it in such a way so that those BYOD users can get at it. And like virtual desktop is one of the best ways to do that, and still keep those assets protected.
So we talked about BYOD scenario, and that I understand that. But what about bring your own cloud storage? I know a lot of people. You talked a little bit about Azure and S3, but what about OneDrive and Dropbox and all these systems out there? How can this help with that? Because if people might drop their data right on there, is there a way to track it and regulate it as well?
Yeah. So for us, we are ideally suited for enterprises where those types of solutions don't really fit the bill, right? So if you think about like any sort of high performance computing, anything with very large files, gigabytes in size, video editing, life sciences, large data sets. Those types of workflows don't really fit well into sort of the OneDrive environment, and the same thing goes with like the big cloud providers. It's like you're not, you can move a couple terabytes of data into a cloud, and then it's going to cost you a lot to move that data out. And if you have a workflow that's moving data in and out a lot, it gets really expensive. And so we're ideally suited for that type of data within the enterprise. As opposed to, what would be sort of small amounts of data that would sort of go in OneDrive. But with the technology we've developed, allows you to transparently move that data back and forth to those cloud resources, but more of these sort of bulk storage resources like S3 or Azure, that would be able to take that bulk data and sort of leverage it versus like a OneDrive.
Well, you're talking about the different use cases, and so I'm curious when you talk to potential customers, do you get into the whole OLTP versus OLAP, or transaction processing versus analytics use for the kind of storage networks that you're able to stand up? How are the customers coming to you and saying they would like to use your platform?
It's enterprise storage has kind of been lucky. It's been a pretty mature market since the 90s, and so how customers are typically looking to replace that functionality within their infrastructure, and it's something that constantly turns over as a short lifespan, right? It's like 3 to 5 years. Your network infrastructure, your network attached storage infrastructure, it's perishable because it's based off of hard drives, and so their customers are typically on refresh cycles, and then the other side of that is new projects and new starts or new requirements, right? So it could be anything from collecting a bunch of data, whether that be from sensors or things of that nature, to shooting a new movie and it's raw footage, or medical imaging or anything of that nature where you would have sort of maybe a new start or some sort of business requirement that would require you to go buy that. So the best way to think about it is that it's fulfilling that need, right? So when you think about a customer from a transaction processing perspective, it's what are they doing with that? So it's not necessarily for highly structured data, although there are customers using it for that today. It's for that unstructured data. So if you were to take sort of modern, batch-based, analytical or processing systems where they're dealing with, something like a high-performance computing workload where you would have, either a lot of small files or, a big file that multiple systems are sort of working on, it fits well in that environment from an analytics perspective, because it's sort of architected to deal with things in that manner.
Right. Well, unfortunately, we've actually run out of time. Folks, you've done it again. You've wasted another hour with the Best Dang Enterprise show, according to 9 out of 10 endpoint nodes. We, of course, want to thank our guest, Eric Van Ness, CEO and co-founder of Racktop Systems, for being our guest today. Thank you so much for taking the time, Eric. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell the audience at home where they can find you and your work and anything about Racktop?
Yeah, sure. So to find more about Racktop, go to www.racktopsystems.com, and a lot of information there. And you can follow us on Twitter at Racktop, and all the other info you would ever want is on the website. Drop us a note.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Eric. Of course, I want to thank my co-hosts in crime, starting with Mr. Brian Chibert. You've been burning the midnight oil here. Thank you for being here today and taking the time. Can you tell the folks at home where they can find you and all of your adventures?
Well, follow me on Twitter. I am ADVNETLAB. It stands for Advanced Network Lab. Or drop me an email. I'm Chibert@twit.tv. Would love to hear your show suggestions. Still working through a bunch of lists. I've got some people that I'm tracking down when I have free time. JJ's been throwing a lot of people at me. And if all goes well, the Wi-Fi Alliance is talking about coming on the show to talk WPA3, which would be pretty cool.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to that. Of course, I can't do the show without Mr. Kurt Franklin, the commander of the Swamp. Thank you, Curtis, for being here, making this show more professional. Can you tell us, the folks at home, where they can find you and all of your work?
Well, they can always find my writing over at darkreading.com. And I got a couple of things I'd like to point out. One, bouncing off that WPA3 mention, I did an interview with the Wi-Fi Alliance yesterday, and I will have an article on that. WPA3 is announced formally on Tuesday, so I'll have an article up at Dark Reading on Tuesday, and look forward to joining a conversation with them at some point here on Twiat. Also, Wednesday, we've got a virtual security event for folks whose travel budget won't let them get to places like RSA and Black Hat. We're going to be doing something on Wednesday. I've been leading a panel on how do you know if you've been breached and what to do in those critical first few hours after you know. I'll be tweeting out some links there. You can also find them at Dark Reading. Would love it if some of the Twiat Riot could join us and join the conversation over there. As always, keep up with me on Twitter at KG4GWA, and we'll see you back here, but from the new Swamp Studio.
Fantastic. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you guys for being here. I wouldn't want to do this show without you. Also, I want to thank everyone who makes the show possible as well, especially to Leo and Lisa, who support us each and every week to continue to allow us to do This Week in Enterprise Tech. Of course, thank you to all the engineers. And of course, thank you to you. You tune in each and every week, and we want to make it easy for you to actually watch and subscribe to the show. So go over right now to twit.tv/Twiat. Find all of our back episodes, all of the show notes, guest information, all the links to the stories that we cover during the show, as well as, more importantly, is that next to the videos there's that magic button that allows you to subscribe to the format of your choice, whether it's audio, video, or HD video, and on the device of your choice, phone, tablet, laptop, or desktop. Also, if you're going to subscribe, also remember, we also do the show live sometimes, actually all the time, at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, live at twit.tv. And if you're going to be in the show live, you might as well jump into our actual chat room live as well, irc.twit.tv. We get some great questions. We, in fact, sometimes change the direction of the show just based off the chat room discussion. Also, don't forget to visit me at twitter.com/LouMM. You can find all my work that I do daily at dev.office.com. That's my work at Microsoft. But before we sign out, I also want to thank our TD today as well. Alex, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell the folks at home what's your favorite Hacker movie?
Well, Hackers, obviously.
All right, you had to go to the obligatory Hackers. Maybe we need to get you a better set of movies in your Hacker arsenal. But we still hope to have you back in sooner episodes later on.
Always happy to fill in for Kevin.
Fantastic. Well, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, and if you want to know what's going on in the Enterprise, just keep quiet.